Hi, guys, welcome back to Seriously with S. Today, I am with my friend Mariana, and we're going to be analyzing a case study. Hi, Mariana, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Do you mind introducing yourself to our listeners?
I'm Mariana Hernandez. I'm a nursing major and a health psychology minor.
And what's your background?
So I'm Mexican, I'm a female, and I am 20 years old.
Thank you, Mariana, for introducing yourself. And I am Sophie. I identify as a female and I am from Guatemala. So today we're going to be talking about a medical case study. Hey, Mariana, do you think I should read the case study?
Yeah, you should.
Okay, so we have Antonio, who is a 32-year-old Latino who is deaf and has been living with HIV for the past 6 years. So I want to stop right there because I want to define what HIV is. So, HIV is a sexually transmitted virus, and the most common ways of passing HIV are through unprotected sexual contact, particularly vaginal or anal intercourse. Can you talk a little bit about the treatment for HIV, Mariana?
One moment. So, HIV treatment should be done as soon as possible after diagnosis to prevent any further spreading of the viral disease. All people should be taking the HIV treatment, regardless if you're not showing any serious signs. You are all recommended to take the treatment regardless of that.
I agree, Mariana. So we're going to continue. Antonio is communicating with us. We're his physicians, and he's using a translator who's a 20-year-old male from Guatemala. Antonio has lived in the United States for 17 years. Although all of his family still lives in Guatemala, when he shows up for treatment, his healthcare provider realizes that Antonio has not been adhering to his HIV treatment regimen and that his viral load is increasing. What do you think about this, Mariana, as a health psychology minor?
So this goes back to what I just mentioned about the treatment, that everyone should be adhering to their treatment regardless of if they're not showing symptoms. And I don't agree with what Antonio chose to do by not adhering to his HIV treatment. And as we can see, that led to his viral load increasing.
Right. So it says that Antonio has embraced the U.S. culture since he has been here. He now utilizes westernized medicine for ailments, such as allergies and common colds. However, Antonio also embraces his roots and will turn to herbs and natural remedies if his medicine doesn't work. Although they live in Guatemala, Antonio is very close with his family and talks with his family weekly. His family practices traditional alternative medicine and believes that Antonio has become too westernized in his time in the U.S. His family is also deaf. Mariana, I wanted to talk about the communication that is happening here, because we have to acknowledge the fact that Antonio is a 32-year-old Latino who is deaf. And coincidentally, his interpreter is also from Guatemala. I wanted to talk about the communication because if he's deaf and he's using an interpreter, I feel like this is what kind of getting in the way of the doctor understanding where he is coming from and his roots.
Yeah, I feel like he's not able to fully explain how he feels or his thoughts to the physician. His translator is a 20-year-old male from Guatemala. I believe he could be like a family member, right?
Not legally, it cannot be a family member if you're releasing medical information like that.
Okay.
So then it says that Antonio tells you that he has had severe diarrhea ever since he returned from visiting his family in Guatemala, and his condition prompted him to seek treatment. He informs you that he has been praying several times a day and receiving limpias, spiritual cleanings from a curandero. However, he does not seem to be feeling any better.
So, I don't know if you knew this, but diarrhea is one of the most common problems for people living with HIV. HIV can actually damage the intestine, which can lead to diarrhea.
So I'm not sure how the spiritual cleanings then would help with the diarrhea and intestinal.
Yeah, me neither.
So perhaps that may explain why he does not feel better. When the health provider asks why Antonio has not been adhering to his treatment regimen, he responds that he's afraid of the harmful side effects that the drugs may have on his body. Although he was not concerned about these side effects before, his mother recently brought it up in a discussion.
I believe since the mother, she's not really exposed to westernized medicine, she can have her doubts regarding it. Maybe she thinks it's going to be too strong of a medicine that can damage him. But little does she know that not taking it will actually damage him more.
So it says that we are a 45-year-old African-American male physician who is westernized in your practice and comes from a traditional home. You consider your relationship with your parents to be healthy as you talk monthly, but would not give them power over your decisions in a day-to-day life. You spent 10 years in the military after high school and only recently finished med school. You have not had experience working with an individual who is deaf. So I feel like that is when the culture just seems to impact us the most, because I don't know if, as a 45-year-old African American male physician who is westernized, I am not sure if they understand the collectivist family type that exists for Hispanics.
And also the fact that he only talks to his family monthly rather than Antonio who talks to his family weekly, he wouldn't understand the family dynamics that Antonio has with his family and the influences that may cause to his decision regarding his health.
So what can we do to close these gaps or these barriers and to prevent people from delaying treatment? Because if we look at HIV, there's a lot of pain, fear, death, and sadness associated with this illness. So we know that it's both psychological and biological.
There's this stigma around HIV that, once you get it, that's it for you. So I can see how many people would choose to not take the treatment. But in this case, Antonio, he doesn't really fully understand the risks of not taking the treatment.
The medical treatment helps reduce the rate at which the HIV weakens the immune system. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with natural remedies or home remedies. I mean, I'll have a warm chamomile tea with honey when I have cramps.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also do some natural remedies myself. There's like a Mexican theory that honey will help soothe the throat. But I do agree that in cases like these with HIV and other chronic diseases that you should not look towards natural remedies, but you should look towards the treatments.
Let's go to the questions. How might the physician word his questions to gain an understanding of the patient's culture without being insensitive? I think that's a really good question to ask, because I think that whenever you don't understand something, a culture, a concept, that it's very hard for people to respect it. So how can we gain some understanding along with respect when we're treating patients?
First and foremost, understand where Antonio's coming from. He grew up in a different culture than him. So I believe that he should word his questions as simple as possible so Antonio could fully understand it. Some medical terminology can be very difficult and can be very scary once you first hear it.
And again, question 5, how might culture impact the way that the physician treats the patient? Again, if he comes from a traditional Western background, I feel like he would be more hesitant to be willing to listen to his patient. For example, the parent and the teacher work together. In that case, the teacher doesn't know more than the parent and the parent doesn't know more than the teacher. They both work with the child to see what works for that child. So the parent and the teacher both have a say on how they're treating or how they are helping the student progress in their learning. So as doctors and patients,
the physician should ask Antonio more about why he's hesitant to take the treatment, talk about Antonio's worries, and then the physician can bring peace to Antonio's mind so that Antonio won't have this stigma surrounding the treatment. Not like an intervention, because I feel like that would bring a very hostile environment and that would make Antonio not want to talk. Rather, it would be more of a friendly talk between a physician and his patient.
Yeah, and using words that they can understand, because like you said, the terminology can be hard to understand. I think it's important to keep in mind that the doctors have gone through school. They understand, they know the terms. So when the patient goes in, the patient doesn't know everything that they have learned at med school. So explain why you even have HIV, and then explain the treatment and provide those statistics, and then you can be treating both the psychological and the biological, but understanding that it is a painful, fearful, and a sad process. So how might culture impact the way the physician views the patient's health problems? Again, the fact that he is from a westernized society, which is more individualistic. I mean, we have to talk about the fact that it says you consider your relationship with your parents to be healthy as you talk monthly, but it would not give them the power over your decisions in your day-to-day life. I feel like it's not giving them power over day-to-day life. It's validating and taking into consideration their opinion. It's valuing their opinion enough to consider it.
It's one thing to listen to an opinion, and then it's another thing to let it rule your decision. So another question regarding the case study would be, how might culture impact the way the physician views health? So I believe that he would trust everything that the westernized medicine, since he's a doctor, he went to school, he knows the treatment, he knows the benefits of it.
Health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So we obviously know, that Antonio has HIV and has had it for the past 6 years. And you also mentioned coping. This question's talking about coping. I am
Mm-hmm.
wondering why it has been 6 years and now Antonio is not taking his medication. How has Antonio been coping for the past 6 years?
He had recently went to go visit his family in Guatemala. So I believe that maybe from that trip he talked to his mom about it and maybe she influenced him to stop taking this treatment. And I feel like here's like where psychology comes into play, just how health psychology class it talks about the culture differences and how that may affect patient and physician relationship.
It's just important to ask, why is culture important? Well, the book says that parents, peers, religion, and geography are a few of the key determinants of our behaviors and are examples of what makes up of our culture. Antonio's just definition of that, and I don't think there's anything abnormal about the feelings that he's feeling.
Since the United States is many cultures, physicians must be more open-minded in regards to cases like Antonio's. Can we talk about the next question of how might culture impact the way patient views his own health and presenting health problems? What perceptions might this client have of his own health? Culture will impact the way the patient views his own health and presenting health. Just how we discussed, his culture more prone to natural remedies. So I believe that this might undermine how serious HIV is to Antonio. I can infer that Antonio does not seem to think of HIV as something serious.
You have to consider, if we're talking about a chronic illness such as HIV or diabetes, then we know that there's no cure, that there's treatment.
We can talk about the last question regarding how does culture potentially influence this patient. So we've basically already talked about all of this, but just to refresh, I believe that culture influences the patient. Like I believe family is really big in this culture, like family dynamics, which is why he took into consideration his mom's opinion regarding his medication, which made him stop taking it. And the biases or perceptions that this client may have of healthcare, I believe since he has been in the United States for 17 years, he's already used to the westernized healthcare system. Also mentioned that he uses natural remedies if the westernized medicine doesn't work. It lets us know that he first uses westernized medicine and then he turns to natural remedy. It is very important for Antonio to have a social support here in the States rather than his family all the way in Guatemala.
Well, he can have it in Guatemala too. There's nothing wrong with communication. You can cut off family. Yes, have your family, include your family. He comes from a collectivist society, and if the physician is not respecting that, then that is on the physician's side. When he's already violating then if he's not respecting his beliefs.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. What do you think the outcome of this will be? Knowing the background of the physician and knowing the background of the client, do you think they will come to an understanding?
What I wanted to mention was the lack of representation that the patient may be feeling. I'm assuming that there's no representation, so I feel like it's gonna take time for Antonio to feel comfortable consulting with his physician, who does not look like him, does not understand his language, does not understand his culture, or perhaps if he understands it, does not respect it. The physician can be fine and not say anything about it. The fact that it's the treatment with Antonio.
So I believe that for the outcome, the physician must get knowledge in regards to Antonio's culture, and this way it will benefit both of them at the end of the day.
Of course, communication is key, but understanding and respect, those are vital in any relationship, not just patient-provider, but just in daily interactions. I think that wraps up our podcast. Thank you so much, Mariana, for doing this interview with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think we all learned so much, and it's a diverse world that we live in.